Well, hello and welcome to the Terri Cole Show. I am so happy to spend some time with you today. So, what are we talking about today? Well, I've been getting lots of emails from lots of you, and what you asked me for is what I'm giving you today, which is information about how to resolve conflict quickly. And you didn't just want strategies, you wanted actual scripts. Language, words. So that's exactly what I'm giving you in this episode. So don't worry, you'll be able to actually download. It's just terricole.com/244, and that will give you the quick and dirty guide that I created for you. Maybe not quick and dirty. How about quick and effective is what we'll call it. And you can actually just download that and have it with you. So why now? Well, it's always important to know how to effectively communicate, know how to effectively problem solve, but we've also been a lot closer than we normally would in the past 6 weeks. So a lot of conflict is coming up for people who would not normally be in such close quarters with other people, even if it's their significant other, kids, extended family, friends, and even people that you get along with swimmingly. When you're in this kind of a new situation, it can create conflict. And instead of conflict being a dirty word, instead of you feeling guilty because you feel that way, what about just learning the skills to resolve the conflicts that you experience right now? You'll use these for the rest of your life long after we're no longer sheltering in place. So before I get moving, those of you watching me on YouTube, I want to say, oh my God, thank you so much for all of your comments. You know, I read them all. It makes me feel so happy to know, A, that you're out there, that we're all connected, but that it's helping you, that all I want to do is put out things that will help you. Elevate your joy, lessen your suffering. So thank you for letting me know that that is happening for you. If you have not subscribed to the Terri Cole Show on YouTube, you just got to click that bell so that every time I drop something new, you will get a notification so you don't miss anything. Those of you listening to this on iTunes or on your, not on iTunes, but you know what I mean, listening to the podcast, I want to say thank you for the reviews. I so appreciate you telling me how you feel about it, because really this is all for you. So remember, to get the cheat sheet, all you have to do is go to terricole.com/244. So why don't we start with effective and ineffective communication before we get into actual problem solving strategies and techniques. So what is ineffective communication? Well, it's indirect, right? A lot of times we're hinting or we're implying, but we're not actually saying. It can be antagonistic, right? Sarcastic, angry. It can be cryptic, where there's an underlying message, but the other person is trying to figure it out and can't, or you're trying to figure it out if the other person is being cryptic. It can be nonverbal. So this is where sort of passive aggressive behaviors come in. And that's an eye roll, a heavy sigh, a slam of the door, right? Removing yourself from the room. Passive-aggressive communication can also come in the form of stonewalling or icing out the other person. And that'll be one of our examples later of how to handle it, because that's it's very common, especially if you don't have the words, because we don't have the choice to ignore our feelings forever. We can stuff them down and stuff them down and stuff them down, and then what happens eventually? They come out. So you become a volcano, you explode. A lot of times we'll say things we don't mean, which is not the best, right? We do not want to be doing that. So other ineffective ways is being dishonest, just straight up lying. When someone says, are you okay? Are you upset? You seem upset. And, you know, it's very common, if you don't know how to communicate, or you kind of want to punish the other person, to say things are fine. Anybody? Raise your hand, even if you're home. Have you ever just been like, it's fine, I'm just tired, with hostility pouring off of you? So those are all indirect ways of communicating. So what does direct communication look like? It's to the point. It's assertive, right? And what is assertive? I always say it's that sweet spot in between being too aggressive and too passive. That is being assertive, right? Not afraid to state what you want, how you feel. It's clear. So your underlying message is the same as your obvious message. So it is the opposite of cryptic. It's open, right? It's verbal. You're using language as opposed to just body language or the indirect communication of slamming doors or whatever. It's two ways. So when it's your turn to talk, you should have the stage. When the other person's turn to talk, they should have the stage. But it can't be effective communication between any people. Can't be just one person always talking and the other person always listening or ignoring or whatever, because it just doesn't work. Responsive. So what does that mean? It means the person's talking and you're paying attention to what they're saying, right? You care about the perspective of the person that you're talking to, and hopefully they care about your perspective. It's honest, right? It's the truth, so you're not lying. So let's talk about what is our motivation for wanting to be able to effectively communicate. We want to understand and be understood. So if you go into a conflict resolution, or the other person does, with the desire to win, to crush your opponent, if every conversation is a debate and not a dialogue, you're going in it with the wrong intention. Because the greatest gift in life is to be understood accurately. What deepens intimacy is creating space for the other person, wanting to know them, caring about the way they feel, and them caring about the way that you feel. And you don't have to convince the other person, and you have to remember that. Meaning, you don't have to convince them that you have a right to the way you feel. And I think that this, especially with couples, I've seen this quite a bit over my years as a therapist, where it's as if you have to build a case for the way you feel, or the other person might say, well, you shouldn't feel that way, which is very negating. So these are things that we want to avoid. I have this story about when my husband and I, Victor and I, were first together, and I was coming back from the city, so I was going to the city, and we were living in New Jersey. And when I would get off the train, and this was the beginning of our relationship, when I would get off the train, I would always look, because it was way up high, the train tracks, and I would look to see if the car was there, if he was already there waiting to pick me up. And a lot of times he was, and then sometimes he wasn't. And I noticed I had this very intense reaction inside if he wasn't there. I would be upset. I would feel sort of crestfallen in a way that, I mean, even to me, it was like, I don't even know why I feel this way. So in the beginning, I would just act it out and just be sort of withdrawn from him, or he would say, how was your day? I would be like, fine, I'm just tired. But I was mad. And part of why I didn't talk to him about it immediately, and I figured this out in therapy, was that I felt like I didn't have a right to be mad because he didn't do anything wrong. He would pull up. By the time I walked down the steps, he'd be pulling up. So I was like, well, how can I say anything? Because it's not like he's leaving me standing here for 20 minutes, because he's not. And then in therapy, I realized that even if I didn't understand why I felt that way, I could still let him in on what was going on for me, and I could make a simple request that he try to be there like 2 minutes early, so that when I pulled in, he would be there. And then when I would see him there, I would get so happy and so excited and so couldn't wait to see him and tell him about my day. And so I remember when I was talking to him about it, I was like, I want to share something with you, but I'm not making you wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, but I'm having this experience and I want to know if you were willing to be a part of the solution for us to figure it out. And he was like, okay. So I explained it. And he said, first he's kind of a recovering Catholic. He was all like guilty and like, oh, I'm sorry. And I said, listen, I have no idea why I feel this way. So I'm really actually not making you wrong. I'm asking if you would be willing to try to get there a little bit early so I don't have to feel that way, because I know I'm important to you. I know you're not doing anything to me. I can't even explain my own feelings. So the whole point of me telling you that long way around the barn of that damn story is to say that what Vic needed to do for me was care that I was feeling that way. Even if he didn't understand why, I didn't even understand why. So I couldn't make him understand, but he did care. And then pretty much, that was 22 years ago, and pretty much was never late picking me up, hardly ever again, maybe twice in the last 2 decades. Because I asked him and how I feel is important to him. And it's the same thing, vice versa, right? He can ask me for something, and even if I don't get it, if it's important to him, he's important to me, and that's enough for me to make the effort to do whatever the thing is. And I know not everyone is in that situation, right? I know not everyone, we've together had a lot of therapy and we've separate had a lot of therapy, but that is the benefit of being able to effectively communicate, that you can problem solve. And the point of bringing that story up was that you don't have to justify your feelings. Your job is to communicate them and try to get your needs met in the most respectful and the healthiest way and the most effective way. And that's what this episode is all about. So moving into, we've got effective and ineffective. And I've got my sort of Terry's list of fair fighting, right? Because it's important that we don't do any of these other things because they're very damaging to any ongoing communication. So no kitchen sinking it, as I like to say, which means you can't start talking about an issue and then to sort of win or to beat the other person down, bring up like 10 other things you're still resentful about that maybe you have talked about or maybe you haven't talked about. That really derails what I'm teaching you with these strategies today. We're only handling one issue at a time. And in your mind, the second thing is to think about being loving instead of being right. And there's many different versions of this saying out there, but the reality from a therapeutic point of view is you can't have both of those things being your top priority. You can't want to win and have but I've got the best strategic argument and be loving, because as human beings, we're not always logical, which is why not blaming is so important, which is why being responsible for your own feelings and being responsible for respectfully communicating those feelings is your job, right? Right. All right. How do we do this? We use I statements. And what does that mean? Instead of pointing out, you are sharing your experience, right? So rather than saying how bad, stupid, insensitive they were, which is all judgment. So blaming and judgment really derail this process. And whenever you want to go I will ask you to take a break, take a breath, and think about, but what is my 50% of this dynamic that's going on right now? What am I doing? What am I responsible for? I always say, what is my side of the street? That's what you're responsible for. And the moment you start pointing fingers, you have now crossed over to the other side of the street. And you're also going to derail this process, because nobody wants to be a part of your solution if you're pointing at them and telling them what a jerk they are. Nobody wants to. Give each other your full attention when you're going to have a problem-solving conversation. Give each other your full attention, which means no screens. And I know that I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I'm going to keep saying it because it's so ineffective. And I don't care that it's popular to do that. It is unhealthy besides being rude as shit, because it is, put your phone down and make that request rather than interpreting the person being on their phone as rude. Ask them, hey, I want to have a conversation. Do you have a minute? Can we talk about that? Would you put your phone down? I'll put mine down because this is, I really want you to be here with me. And don't worry, we're going to get to a script about that. Don't interrupt each other. When the person who we call in Harville Hendricks's work, they're called the sender. When you're the person, if you have an issue, when I was telling Vic about the train time, I was the sender. If we were actually doing imago therapy scripts, he would not say anything or interject anything other than being with me, mirroring me, right? Then when I was done, he would have to say, if I heard you right, when I'm late for the train to pick you up, even if it's only a little bit, it hurts your feelings or makes you feel bad or makes you feel unimportant. Did I get that right? And then I would say yes. And then he would say, is there more? And maybe there would have been more. Yes, and you know, whatever. I don't know what the more is, but you get the point. And then in the end, the person who's receiving is being like, okay, what you make sense to me. I understand how you can feel that way. It must have made you feel bad or whatever it is. Like, we're trying to empathize with the other person when we're actually the receiver. Okay. Because mirroring back, which is the next step on the effective communication list for me, is so important because so much of the time we put our own slant on what they said. So if the person receiving is feeling really defensive and they're like, so what you're saying is that I'm a friggin' idiot, right? Is that what you said? Then the sender would be able to say, no. What I said was that it hurts my feelings when you're late and I'm making a simple request that you be on time. So, and then they would have to say it again. Okay, so if I heard you right, it hurts your feelings when I'm late and you would like me to be on time. Did I get that right? Then you're in agreement. This is how the understanding becomes more and more clear, and we have a lot less projection going on. And then the last thing on my own list is you have to agree to take a time out if it gets too heated. You just have to. Every person has to have the right to be like, hey, I think this is getting too hot. Let's circle back later because I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret. Because here's the thing with words, they become weapons. So you might want to, maybe you're a big apologizer and good for you. But what you can't do is you don't have the power to unring that bell from whatever mean thing you said. It does damage. It does damage. So controlling your anger, controlling yourself, being aware that once it's out of your mouth, you can say, well, I said I was sorry. Does that mean the other person forgets what you said? No, they do not. So with the scripts, let's just move into how can you listen with an open heart and an open mind. If you want the other person, right? You want the other person to be listening with an open heart and an open mind. But you also want to be listening with the intention, the specific intention of understanding the other, rather than gathering evidence to make a case against them. So if you find yourself in your mind thinking about all the ways they're wrong or trying to derail it by saying small things are wrong, like, no, that wasn't on Wednesday, though, that was on Tuesday. Do you know how we can get petty when we're in a conflict? We'd rather not do that. If you have something to say, you can, here's the script, and it's in your downloadable thing, so don't worry, it's in your cheat sheet. I have something important I'd like to share with you. Can you please let me finish my thoughts before interjecting yours? I promise to do the same for you so that we both will be fully understood, right? That's just a little script that you can use. Using the silent treatment is another real pitfall of communication. It's silent but deadly, I like to say, because it's really passive aggressive. As you know, it's ineffective communication in action right there. And it's important sometimes to name rather than acting out the dysfunctional thing you want to do, like icing someone out or ignoring them. You can name it. So in this script that I'm giving you, you can say, I'm upset right now. My first instinct is to ignore you and this entire situation, but I want us to effectively problem solve more than I want to ignore you. Can you please give me a few minutes or half an hour, or can we pick this up tomorrow, or whatever, to cool off and think about how I feel. Then let's come back together and talk it out. I love you and I don't want to fight or ignore you to make a point. If you can say that, because people, a lot of times clients would say, I was trying not to do the old behavior, but I didn't know what to say. And I'm like, listen, when in doubt, two things. If you're the one who's always talking and saying things that are mean, when in doubt, don't talk. When in doubt, just say, hey, I'm taking a break, because you can't really trust yourself if you have a tendency to say terrible things. And the other thing, when in doubt, take a break, right? Don't act it out. When in doubt, say the thing. Name it. I feel like slamming doors right now, but I'm not going to, because I know that doesn't work. And it makes me feel bad afterwards. So there's some words for you. And the last one I'm going to hit, because this is getting long, is inability, your inability, or the other person's inability to express needs. Because here's the thing. Nobody can read your mind. If you don't have the ability to express what it is you know. And for some of you, that'll mean figuring out what you need, right? But you have to be able to express it, because it's no one's job to read your mind. And them not reading your mind doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they don't have that skill, and it's really not their job or yours to read anyone else's mind. So we're going to talk. I've written down a few things because this is really helpful. If it's hard for you to talk about it, I would always have clients write it down and literally read it out of their journal or off a pad. It may feel weird, but it is so much more important to say what it is that you really want to say, meaning express yourself fully about you, not what you want to say about them, but about how those actions made you feel. What was the impact on you? So you could say, I've written down a few things that I want to communicate to you, so can you please wait until I'm done sharing them with you before responding? You know that asking for what I want is challenging for me, and I would really appreciate your patience and compassion while I work to get better at it. And obviously with all these scripts, you guys, you're going to make them your own, right? You take what works and leave the rest, and you can leave the rest. And remember, speaking up, just like drawing boundaries, this is not about controlling the other person. It really isn't. We need to speak up even if they don't do what we want, because your healing and your empowerment comes from being able to say what's on your mind. And before you say what's on your mind, I want you to take these steps and these fair fighting rules I've given you and all of that, and get clear that there is a right, aka effective way to problem solve. And there is a less effective way to problem solve. So this is going to do it for this episode of the Terri Cole Show. I have so much more that I want to teach you about conflict resolution and effective communication, to the point where I will most likely continue this next week with different styles and different kinds of strategies and scripts that you can do. So if you like this, please share it in your world. Please share it with people who you know. If you're having problems right now, share it with the people you're with. Let them, get the cheat sheet themselves, so they have a guide of how they can communicate with you more effectively than they've been. I want you to know that I hear you, I see you, every comment, every review, every interaction, and I got you. So please keep telling me how you're doing. Please keep sharing your biggest challenges, and then I will create free content to support you so that you can create a life that you really, really love. I hope you have an amazing week effectively communicating. And as always, take care of you.